All right, we're no longer going to be on any CP time or anything like that. We're going to start this thing. Let's do it.
There is a story so strange in its implications that it defies ordinary classification.
Blacker than black times infinity.
So welcome to Blacker Than Black Times Infinity's second San Francisco Comic-Con panel on diversity. Oh, very nice. All right. There we go. I'm Cthulhu's Prodigy. Alongside me is Chronos.
What's going on, everybody?
And we got my boy, Old. Yes, he's that old. All right, now before we even get started, what I want you to do is pull out your cell phones, pull out your tablet, pull out your device, smash that like button on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe. You're going to love it. Trust me.
What if they don't like it?
They'll love it. Don't worry. Blacker Than Black Times Infinity, at BTI.
We have cards too for.
Yeah, we got plenty of cards up here. We have a lovely assistant over there that might be handing out some cards.
I call you better white. It's all good.
Okay, let's dive right in. So how many of y'all are currently reading and watching diverse forms of media from television or comics?
Or gaming.
Okay, all right. Our job here is done. We're done. I feel like right now diversity is kind of a buzzword in a lot of geek fandoms. And on one side, you've got people who never support diversity whatsoever. They don't want any changes to traditional characters whatsoever. And on kind of the other side of the extreme, you see a lot of people that want you to support every single diverse character imaginable. I feel like there's some middle ground. So let's dive right in. Looking at both extremes and canceling those out, I think you can evaluate a piece of media for what it is based on quality and whether the characters are relatable. For me, one of the things that I enjoyed the most from this past year, even though I disagreed with some aspects of this story, on Spider-Man's Homecoming, how many people actually went out into the theaters and saw that? Great, awesome.
Anybody like it? People like it? Yeah.
Overall, okay, great. Boo that man. But anyway, on Spider-Man's Homecoming, we had a drastic change with Mr. Peter Parker. And in that drastic change, Peter Parker no longer liked redheads. He liked red bones. Did y'all notice that? All right. I was okay with that, though. I thought that was a cool change. It was kind of fun, you know what I mean? And very inclusive.
Well, for those that didn't know, Mary Jane in the comic books was Caucasian, not. I don't know what Zendaya is. I know she's mixed, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mixed ethnicity.
But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter to the story.
No.
She's changed, so.
I thought it was cool. He had two Redbone love interests. And that was dope. That was really dope.
Prodigy, what is a redbone for people that don't know what a redbone is?
Usually an African-American female who's light-skinned or, don't get in trouble here, man. I'm trying to work. But I thought that was a really cool change that they did in a major motion picture. But let's jump into one of my favorite things going on right now on a TV series that is based upon an IDW comic that almost nobody actually read. Who's supporting right now on Sci-Fi Channel Winona Earp? A few folks, okay.
So for all three of you.
Yeah, that's all right. We're good.
See his life.
One of the reasons why I love this series, you have a lot of strong female characters, which is another kind of buzzword that we've heard a lot lately. But they're on equal footing with obviously all the male characters. You have the South Asian, you have the African American, you have the East Asian, you have Native American characters, and you have them doing badass stuff, most importantly. So for me, when you have characters who kind of give me that feeling of old school Xena or Wonder Woman, even Buffy the Vampire Slayer, few Buffy fans, I like it. You can easily just suspend your disbelief, jump on board, have fun, and obviously support these awesome characters and love the diversity in it. Now, on the flip side, how many folks are familiar with Mr. John Boyega? Okay. Of course, everybody should be. He was in a small independent film that probably nobody ever heard of.
What is this dish called? Star Battle?
Yeah.
He lost a bet, by the way. He's also doing a podcast. He thought that The Force Awakens would make less than, what was it? Some dinosaur film?
Yeah, some dinosaur
He
film.
lost and he had to dress up as Princess Slave Leia, actually, on the podcast live. So.
I rocked it. I look good though.
Yeah, you did look good. You did look good in the bikini. One of the reasons why I'm bringing up John Boyega, I thought that he went way too far earlier this year with his criticism of Game of Thrones. And his quote was, "There are no black people on Game of Thrones, and you don't see one black person in Lord of the Rings, therefore basically I won't support it." Yeah, I love Game of Thrones, and I'm obviously African American, and there are African American characters on that series. I think that it would behoove him and even some of his followers, and not that I'm throwing shade because I like John Boyega a whole lot. I loved him in Star Wars, but it would be nice to kind of back up a little bit and show some respect for the characters who are in there, and not crap on the series as a whole that so many people love. Jump in.
Yeah, it's like he didn't really actually watch the show because one of the favorite couples in there is Missandei. I think that's how you say her name, right?
Yep, Missandei and Grey Worm.
And Grey Worm. No, it's a great couple, I thought. And I thought it was really cool about... Anybody watch Game of Thrones in here?
All right. I see some cosplayers back there with Game of Thrones, I think, right? No? Okay, never mind.
I was just wondering how they're going to do it, to be honest with you. And then I looked it up and I was like, whoa, like, that's a rabbit hole, because if y'all didn't know, Grey Worm doesn't have a Grey Worm. Yeah, I was like, that was really interesting. There's a bunch of other African American characters and other characters in the show that are great, but I think that he just saw the main characters were not diverse, and he just kind of threw shade just in general at the show, and I don't think it was really called for. I don't think you got to throw shade on a show just because they don't have what you like. You just don't watch it. I mean, that's the way I do things with my money. Is if I don't like something, I don't support it. I don't buy it. There's really no need to, especially when he's on an elevated platform like that, to throw shade like that.
The fans actually obviously support Game of Thrones, they support Lord of the Rings, they support Star Wars, and they are the ones who ultimately decide that the quality is good enough to supersede or be more important than anything having to do with an agenda.
Yeah, it is misinformed. That's the most disappointing part, is a misinformed opinion.
Yep. So I would say, like what you like, support quality, try new series that are diverse, and then try to support it and yell as loudly as possible online in support of those great things.
Awesome.
All right, go ahead.
You want me?
Yeah, let's
All
go
right.
to you.
Awesome. So I'm a really avid comic book reader. I have probably one of the biggest pulls of most people that I know. If my pull weekly is $50, I'm saving money. Usually it's above $70. So I read a lot of comics. I'm always looking for like the next new thing in comic books. And I came across a comic book series by Lion Forge Comics. Everybody heard of Lion Forge at all? See, crickets. This is why I'm glad we have this panel.
Break it down.
Lion Forge Comics, they have this new series called Catalyst Prime, and it's all about diverse characters and superheroes and supervillains. But it's done in a non-forced way. I'm going to give you their example of how they do it, then I'm going to give you a bad example of how some companies force upon us diversity in the wrong way. So in Catalyst Prime, I'll set up just briefly what it's all about. So basically, there's a meteor is going to come hit the Earth, and they send a team of astronauts out to intercept the meteor. It's kind of like, what was that movie back in the day? Armageddon. There we go.
Or Deep Impact, either one.
Yeah, kind of like Armageddon. They go to the asteroid or meteor or whatever, they blow it up, and they think they accomplished their mission. But for some reason, the meteor still hits the Earth. And I'm not going to get into the end. This is just the very first comic. And it turns out that when the meteor hits the Earth, it gives people powers, random people powers. And so the first person that you meet is a gentleman by the name of Noble. And he's African American, and he has telekinetic powers. And I thought it was really cool to have, when I first started reading it, it didn't tell me on the first page that, hey, this guy is black. This is what he likes. Like, I hate reading that. Like, if I see, like, in the beginning where it tells me how I should feel about a character, like, I probably just throw it away, to be honest with you. Because in my experience, they've all been garbage. When I see that this is how you feel about the character, I need things to be story-driven. So if he has certain ways he feels about things, I need to understand why, not just you throwing it at me kind of lazily. And that's one of the things I did in this one. Is like I still don't know that much about the character, and we're in like the 5th comic, and I like that mystery. It brings me back to the comic every week, or it's actually not weekly; it's monthly. And they also have other groups of superheroes that also have powers that are diverse. The next one that came up was Excel. He's a Latino character. He's a speedster, and what's different about him is that usually speedsters heal fast, but for him, he doesn't feel pain when he's going fast. But afterwards, he's a total normal human, so he ends up in the hospital almost every time. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on a speedster. They also have one of the first, maybe, I don't know if it's the first, or it's one of the very few characters with Down syndrome. He's a superhero with Down syndrome. And you don't even realize that in the first, like, the only reason why I knew about it is I talked to the editor. We had Joseph P. Illidge on our podcast. He's a senior editor at Lion Forge, and I heard about they're going to have a Down syndrome character, and he confirmed it. But they haven't really confirmed it in the comic yet. So all you know is that he's wearing like this suit, and he has super strength, and he can shoot like these I-beams that can hurt or control you. And I thought that was really cool, something I've never read before, and I love reading new things. And the last one that just came out is The Incidentals, which is a superhero team that I don't know much about yet because the first one just came out and I can barely remember all the names yet. Because I think it's like 5 superheroes and it seemed pretty cool. And the supervillain in this is actually a Latina chick. And I thought nobody's doing that. Like, it's very rare to have female super villains that do not have a female superhero protagonist. You know what I mean? True. It's usually either or. So I thought that was a really cool take on it. And they also have really cool what do you call it? You don't see things coming in these comics. They don't seem cookie cutter at all. And so now that I've talked about something that was really cool with comic books, now I like seeing where that direction is going. I want to talk about where some comic books have kind of missed a step, in my opinion. Marvel, I believe last year, started missing steps when it came to changing characters, and everybody thought that people weren't reading them because they were diverse. Well, that's not the reason why people weren't reading them. There's a problem that Marvel has right now with, if you go watch the Avengers right now, and then you go read the comic books, not one of the Avengers is the actual character in the comic books right now. None of them. That's very confusing to the audience. It's like, wait a minute, I just watched Hulk, it's this guy, but in the comics it's 2 people, right? You have one who's Asian, that's cool, and then the other one is She-Hulk, which they renamed to the Hulk for some reason. And I was getting that comic for a while, but then I realized after 5 comic books, she didn't Hulk out once. So I'm like, why don't you just call Jennifer Walters lawyer? Like, that would have been more appropriate. You know what I mean? Like, you can't call it the Hulk without the Hulk. So, like, that was really weird for me. I think they're wasting a character in Jennifer Walters. Which, I mean, if it was just her being a lawyer and they told me that this is the story, I would have no problem picking it up. But you can't tell me that this is a Hulk comic when there's no Hulk. And Amadeus show, he's doing all right. So, and also Thor's now Jane Foster, which is confusing for people because they don't know who Jane Foster is. You might know from Thor. She was the
Natalie Portman's character.
But if you read the comics, you're like, well, why is she a female? And you're like, what happened to the other Thor? Well, he's called the Mighty Thor. And so that's confusing. You know, so it's like, all right, now they're going to make the Ultimate Thor. And it's just like, that's really weird.
Plus Thor is Thor's name.
Yeah. Which they kind of got around it because he gave the name to her, which is fine, but it's still, you know, it's still kind of weird. And then Wolverine is now X-23, who I love X-23. But, she's not Wolverine. Wolverine just happens to be gone right now, but I don't think that they needed a character to replace him. And the same thing with Riri Williams. That's now Iron Man, even though she's really Ironheart. So it's confusing. Like I said, it's very confusing. And the main problems that I have when they do this is I feel like they're making these characters diverse, but they don't believe in real diversity. If they would have believed in real diversity where they gave these characters their own actual stories, instead what they're doing is they're taking a legacy of these other characters and they're just putting them on top of it. They're like, here, this is the new one, go read it. But you can't do that because you're going to have people like me, and obviously it shows with their sales. They're totally down. Nobody's reading the comics, which is a shame because some of them are really good, but they're not going to read them because they built that legacy and they kind of just destroyed it by tossing somebody else on top. And then they want to say that, oh, well, our readers don't like diverse comics. No, They just want real, new, diverse characters. That's the problem. And also, there's a very poorly written comic called. Does anybody in here read America? You read it? It's okay if you guys read it. You read it? Do you like the comic book? No? Okay, so now I'm not gonna all right.
Buckle up.
Yeah, so America was a comic. She's a comic book character who has these powers where she can basically punch holes through time and space. It's a cool power. She has super strength. I was introduced to her through a comic book called The Ultimates. It's a great comic. If y'all don't read it, get a chance to pick it up. It's got really cool characters in it. And she actually leads the group. And she's a total badass in this group. And when they came out with America the Comic, I don't think the person who actually wrote the comic read comics or read about this character at all, because they made her go from being in the Ultimates, from saving multiple universes, to going back to college. And I was like very confused. And I knew the character was gay, but they really pushed it in this comic. I'm not saying it's not wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to push it, but they did it in like a so poorly done that I just had to stop reading it. Like, this is a perfect example. They introduce her girlfriend on one page. 3 pages later, they break up. And I'm just like, what was the point of even writing that in there? Like, I wanted to be invested in this story, but you introduce a character and then take it away like almost immediately. And it's like, come on, you can't do that. And then they literally had some quote unquote villains in this comic that literally were just white privilege. And I was like, come on, that's like super lazy. I mean, I understand it's kind of like with the times or whatever, and it was just one of those things where she basically beats her right up in like one punch. It's like One Punch Man pretty much. And it's just like, you have to build, the only thing that makes a great superhero are super villains, right? You can't have a superhero that doesn't really have a challenge. You know, if you just go around and punch people once and they're out, it's like, what's the point of reading that, you know? So, yeah, and another thing I wanted to touch upon, it's probably going to be the most, I guess, controversial, is cultural appropriation. Because I can't...
goes over the crowd.
Yeah, I can't stand this topic.
You see everyone just take a deep breath right there.
Yeah, hold on. You'll take a deep breath, I'm going to take a deep drink.
Just piggyback on what Kronos was talking about. So the America comic is written by a gay Latina. So, but yet this is what she's writing about. So this is what she's giving to her audience, which obviously Kronos has issue with. I mean, those of you who like the comic, it's totally fine. But
well, I wish you would have wrote a new character, right? That she wanted to. That was her dream, instead of taking something else and then making it her dream. That's what was disappointing for me. So yeah, cultural appropriation. So I know that's like a big hot button issue right now. People seem to get mad sometimes for certain things, and nobody knows what they are. I think it's like a total mystery to most people, like what's appropriation and what's not. And I think people are missing the point. If you're in America, like we basically all culturally appropriated at some point in time. Like we have. I'm wearing a Naruto shirt. I don't care. All right. So
wait, I'm appropriating us.
I think society would be better off if we continue mixing like we always have. This is supposed to be the great mixing pot, right, in America, and I think people have just lost that just to make to virtue signal, basically. They want to virtue signal that, hey, I think what you're doing is wrong, but they don't give you a reason why, right? I think if you really think somebody is appropriating your culture and are doing it wrong, maybe you should explain to them how it's wrong and then break down, you know, what your culture's all about. I think people are missing that point when you just scream cultural appropriation or, you know, don't do this in my culture. It's like, well, why don't you educate them on your culture? Instead, what you're doing is you're giving them a negative perception of your culture by saying, hey, you can't do this, you can't even research it, I'm not even gonna tell you why. And that really makes me angry, like seriously angry, because I think we'd be better off if we all knew more about each other's cultures. I mean, seriously. Like, I love, yeah, go ahead. I'll take the claps.
Nice.
On a typical day, I'll do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that is a Japanese martial art that was taken by the Brazilians and then changed. On the way home, I'll grab some Mexican food. I'll also grab some German beer, and I'll go home and watch some anime. All that stuff is different cultures, and that should never be criticized, because I enjoy those cultures, and I'm never trying to disrespect them. I'm trying to learn more about them, and I enjoy them. So hopefully, And then there's other things in like that are cultural, quote unquote, cultural appropriation that people just think is okay. Like the Wu-Tang Clan. Everybody likes the Wu-Tang Clan, right?
Of course.
Yeah. I
Ain't
mean,
nothing to F with.
yeah. They've taken all this stuff from Chinese martial art movies. Nobody says a thing. You know, Samurai Champloo did the reverse. It's an anime that's mixed in with, you know, samurais mixed with hip hop. I thought that was great. You know, Cowboy Bebop, same thing. They mixed in jazz with anime. That was awesome. And a lot of anime has Caucasians in it, but people just like ignore it. It's like there's a whole bunch of anime characters that, oh, the guy has orange hair. Is he Japanese? No, he's not. Like Ichigo from Bleach is not Japanese. Naruto, probably not Japanese. He's got blonde hair and blue eyes. You know what I mean? It's just like, and the Japanese have no problem with that. And I don't think we should have a problem with that either. And then, yeah, I mean, martial arts are always mixes of cultures. In South Korea, they have Korean hip hop now and K-pop. That's heavily influenced by American 90s hip hop and R&B, and I think that's all awesome. Oh, Ninja, what you got?
How many gamers do we have in the house tonight? Got a few.
Look at all them hands.
All right. So with the gaming community, a lot of you probably noticed that characters that we are given are usually set a particular way, but there's been this trend now of characters that we're given, we're able to create our own in whatever image we want. You can make them male, female, alien, or whatever. There's a particular game that's out right now. It just came out recently. I was able to finish and enjoy it. It's part of the Uncharted franchise. Anyone play Uncharted here? It's actually
Great series.
yeah, it's actually quite less than I expected. The latest in their franchise was the Uncharted Lost Legacy. So in that game, it takes two companion characters and make them the centerpiece of the franchise. So normally you are starring as Nathan Drake, who is white male, treasure hunter. You know, he kind of looks like Nathan Fillion actually.
That's true.
But in Lost Legacy, you take two companion characters. Actually, one was a villain in the last, I guess, Uncharted 4. Yeah, Uncharted 4, she was a villain. And they take these two characters and put them together, and you control one of them, and you have an adventure with them. The thing is that one of the characters you think is Australian, she's actually half Indian. So she's following her father, who is Indian, born in India. He was on a quest, and she ends up finishing that quest. So she is part Indian, part Australian, and raised in Australia. The other character...
With an Australian accent.
Yes. The other character is a British woman of African descent. So both of them team up to take on this adventure, and they're both women of color. So this is kind of what, I guess, traditional like Hollywood or even big AAA games think is risky, because you have two women of color front and center that you are controlling in a quote-unquote man's world, or, you know, I guess 18 to 35 age range. So this is actually really interesting to me, because I was introduced to these characters in the Uncharted franchise, but then we get to see a deeper level of these two women that are both ass-kicking, both kind of, I want to say, risk takers, but they end up working together and trying to complete this goal, and you learn a lot about them, especially their past, especially with the character Chloe Fraser. She's the one that I mentioned that's half Indian, half Australian. And this is something that you don't necessarily get that often. Like a woman of color that you get to control, and she's front and center. She is the hero in this story. Most of the time you see, you know, Marcus Phoenix, Nathan Drake, who else big out there?
Master Chief.
Yeah, Master Chief, who you know is most likely white, even though you don't really see his face. But I mean, these are huge characters. Oh, Sans Aran.
I was gonna say they're bringing Metroid back, which I'm happy. It's my favorite series of all time.
Yeah, so I mean, these are characters that are generally white, but I mean, like, there's games that like Mass Effect and the upcoming Destiny 2, which drops next week. So you better get that. Those games allow you to dress up your character however you want. You can pick your race and your sex, and then go on from there. Even though your character rarely talks, it's still, you can make a reflection of you, someone you want to be like, someone that you know, someone that you admire, and whatnot. I think these are changes in the industry that I think a lot of games should kind of follow suit. If you're a gamer, you probably see like more and more like you're able to do that. Like, can anybody play like MMOs or RPGs, things like that?
Just a little.
Just a little. Is everyone else just like Call of Duty, Battlefield? Because those, like most of those people, you don't really care. Once you die, you're somebody else, or your loadout or whatever. But yeah, if you've never played the Uncharted series, if you have PS4, I highly recommend picking this up, playing this, and getting to know these two characters and what their struggles were. I mean, they talk about pretty much being women in a predominantly man's world, but yet how they were able to rise above and still come out on top and be heroes. So
They do kill people though.
well, most heroes do. Like, when you're playing, that's the whole point of the game, right? You're there to be badass or godlike.
The whole point of the game is murder.
Yeah,
And you're a hero.
pretty much. I mean, there are very few games where you're doing like non-stuff. Like your favorite, Journey.
I can't stand that game.
Yeah, we were some Journey. Yeah, Journey is his musical based.
He doesn't know what art is, y'all, so.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Yeah. We're gonna open it up.
Yeah, we can. Good. Anybody have any questions about diversity in media that you kind of want to ask us from Be Them BTI? I got a question all the way in the back. Yes, you.
So we're getting more and more female heroes on screen recently, which is great. But I've noticed that we don't have as many female villains on the big screen and small screen. The only one I can think off the top of my head is the Netflix Marvel series with the hand.
Jessica Jones, The Defenders.
Jessica Jones,
Yeah.
Luke Cage, and the Defenders. Yeah. So I was wondering why you guys think that female villains, especially female like master villains, like sometimes we get female like sub villains, but they're not the ones in charge, right?
Yeah.
Wondering what you guys think why it is that way. That's like a barrier that we still have to cross.
So, that's a good question. So the thing is, I think that just recently, I think last year, Hollywood realized that women watch movies. Oh my goodness. So that's the main reason why, is because they didn't realize that ladies watched action movies at all. And obviously they were mistaken because Wonder Woman came out and it broke records. So, and even then, the hero, or the villain, was a guy, is Ares, which is one of the main villains in her story. But yeah, you're going to keep getting, I don't want to say a half-assed approach, but you're going to get a safe approach to every female movie, I think, going forward. I think Wonder Woman was a step in the right direction, but they're still going to try to get there as safe as possible because they're going to still want to include men to watch the movies. But I think if they just came at it as making a good movie, they'd be better off, right? And eventually, we're going to get some good female villains. Because, yeah, you're right. I think Elektra's like one of the few. Go ahead.
Really? Yeah, go ahead.
If I could just make a comment. So the movie Thor, Ragnarok, Hela is the goddess of
Yeah.
that, is going to be the, I think, first
Yes.
major female villain.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rita Repulsa?
Yeah, someone too.
Yeah.
I got my fingers crossed on something, and this obviously hasn't been announced yet. I'm a huge fan of Thanos, so obviously he's going to be making not his debut, but the movie The Infinity War is going to be all about him, both parts. What I demand to see Marvel is death basically being his motivation and being the ultimate villain kind of behind Thanos, and basically a female version of death in that film. And I think that's going to be the greatest example if they actually execute, because we haven't heard anything about casting quite yet for that role, that we could ever hope for. So hopefully we get death.
Well, and she's not just behind
The motivation.
She's behind all the motivation. Yeah, so basically he's doing everything to please death. And so if they don't have her in the movie, who I think is actually in Deadpool, but that's just my own thoughts. I think it's Deadpool's girlfriend. I think that's Death, because it should be.
Really quick, if you watch the show Once Upon a Time, the main villain is usually the evil queen for the most part, and then becomes her sister. So those two are pretty fleshed out. Sometimes, certain seasons, there's a guy. I mean, you argue that
So
No, that's a good point because that's actually one of my few gripes about Wonder Woman is that she was not Amazon like stature at all. Actually, when I first heard that Gal Gadot was going to be Wonder Woman, we kind of crapped on her. Actually, we kind of crapped on the movie in general when we first saw the first trailer, and thank goodness we were wrong. We were totally wrong about that. Obviously, she's not the right size, but she did have the presence of an Amazon. But yeah, you're right. There should be larger women. I think the only, what was it, Gwendolyn? Yeah. What was her name though? Gwendolyn Christie. I think she's close to 7 feet tall.
I'd like to see more. I really would. It becomes more believable, when I see someone who's, 6'4", 220, or something like that, actually kicking ass. So I want to see more of that. That's a great point.
Yeah, we've had a couple of MMA stars. We had Ronda Rousey in the Fast and Furious films. We also had Gina Carano in Deadpool, and she's also in Fast and Furious. So women who have been proven in the real world that they can fight.
Haywire.
Haywire. Actually, that's an interesting movie. I actually kind of like that movie.
I like that because that dude that I hate died. What was that guy's name? Pretty guy. Yeah, Channing Tatum died. Every movie he dies in I love. I can't stand that dude. Like, he was a good stripper, I guess, but you can't act for nothing.
Watch Magic Mike. No, sorry.
I got a girlfriend.
Do we have another question?
You want a question in the back?
Blue.
Do you guys feel that The Flash is a very good example of diversity on TV shows that are out right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about the relationship between Iris West and Barry Allen, right? So I think that was really cool to have on screen. And they actually have a pretty diverse cast in general. They have Cisco, who's Latino, and then there's a few other characters as well.
There's the best black father on television on that show, and that's Joe West. And I think I've said it a million times, but the relationship between Barry, his kind of adopted son, who's the Flash, and then Joe is it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to watch. I love when Barry actually calls him dad. And that happens all the time. So that show has a lot of heart, and I appreciate it quite a bit.
Yeah, the family dynamic on The Flash, I think, is what drives the show, especially what each member of the Flash team is willing to do for their family, especially Joe. I think that's one of the best family dramas on TV.
Period. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Do we have a question over here?
Actually, I'm going to come back to you, and we'll do this one over here in the pink.
So, like, we have diversity in all these pieces of media, but do you think there are any really good examples of intersectionality?
No, and I think part of that is due to it's sort of still new in our society, right? So we're just now just in the past couple of years, I didn't know about it before maybe 2-3 years ago. And so I think once we get more of a definition on things and once it becomes more widely accepted in society, which I think we're already well on the way there, I wouldn't be surprised that we're going to get some of that coming out very soon. But it takes time. I mean, we're just now getting female superhero movies. It's like society is very slow for some reason. Especially, not society, media is very slow because they're always worried about demographics instead of making good content. And so it always comes down to the bottom line. But like I said, you make a good movie, you make a good movie.
For independent comics, I think we're seeing much more of that, which is fun and awesome. And I agree with Kronos. It's going to take a while for depictions in TV shows and movies. I'm all here for it. I want to see that happen, but for right now, people got to make as much of their own content as possible, and then of course circulate and support online that content.
Yeah. Also, use your online voice. I mean, if you want to see it, demand it. So demand it until they hear it.
Yes, because I see so much siloing, I guess. It's all about, it's all about the female character, it's all about the black character, all about, the gay character, and it's not really a whole lot of interaction, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally true. I mean, we still have things in media right now where, I didn't coin this phrase, a gentleman by the name of David Cho coined this phrase. He had this thing called the fear of the yellow man. And the thing was that in media for the longest time, you would never see an Asian character have any intimacy with anybody other than an Asian character. And it's so weird. Like, you think about it now, it barely ever happens. Like, Into the Badlands does it, right? But other than that,
And
it doesn't really exist.
the only other one we got is Walking Dead with Glenn.
Yeah,
That's it.
and that's basically it. And we have all these Asian actors, but you don't have the same representation on how they would be in real life. You know what I mean? It's totally weird. And even just like the way they have, you know, mixed couples a lot of the time, it's just like it's usually just black and white. It's very rare as it's somebody. So that's why I'm saying, you know, just it takes time for everything to catch up, and eventually it will.
We have one more here, and then we'll go in the back. Go ahead.
Actually, I think it was kind of answered partly by that.
Okay. Go in the back.
I was just going to mention Switch to Birth has the Latinx and white and ableism around there's a deaf female lead.
Okay.
Yeah, and a Latinx female lead.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just that was another thing too with like having disabled people in media as well. That's a weird one. Like I see all these big name actors that are. Like, I didn't think about this until I was listening to a W. Kamau Bell podcast, and they had somebody on that was disabled, and she acts, and she said that you have all these actors that get in a wheelchair, and they're not disabled at all. So it's like, why can't you have somebody that's actually, you know, has that, you know, whatever, and then have them in that role? Like, it's much more believable. Like, I don't know, Denzel Washington in a wheelchair, I know that dude can walk. Like, that's, you know, you're not fooling me. You know, so it's like I would much more believe somebody that lived that life, and they would probably have all kinds of stuff I never even thought about from being in a wheelchair, what their daily life is like, and that's what I want to see.
Another question? Got one over here.
Going back to the sort of female diversity, what do you guys think about this new, I don't know about a new trend, but the current trend of all-female reboots or all-female remakes?
Oh boy.
Well, I know we talked about the all-female Ghostbusters last year, and now we're talking about the Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
I'm going to say this. For established franchises, sometimes I kind of roll my eyes a little bit at the reboots. Just reboots in general. There's too many reboots. If it's an all-female cast, it really will depend on the casting. But in general, if it's new versus a reboot, I'll give it more of a chance on the new side. Reboots just irk me. And the Ghostbusters film didn't do well financially. I didn't have any interest in watching it. I'm not crapping on those ladies that played those roles whatsoever, but it just felt lazy and low quality. I'm just going to be very honest with you. If this new reboot that you're talking about actually has high quality and gets some buzz, I may support it. So I'll give it a chance.
Yeah, I always feel like there's an air of laziness when they do reboots, because they know that they made money on it once. Let's just do it again, but change them to some other ethnicity or gender. It's just like, well, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? You have to make it, like I keep saying, you got to make a good story. And when you just do a reboot, you try to just hash these characters in, you know, that are a little different. Like, it's not always going to work. And America has already spoken with their money when it comes to a lot of these reboots. Not even just speaking about like Ghostbusters, but we saw it with Transformers, and I was like, thank God, finally. Everybody saw these movies are crappy. Like, finally. Like, the first one wasn't that good, and I was like, it's got a little bit of, you know, but the parts I didn't like, they doubled down and tripled down, and then they had robots with balls. And I was like, dude, how do you have robots with balls? Like, and it was still making money, and they finally it bombed. So I was like, thank goodness.
I want to say, kind of piggybacking on what Prodigy was talking about, it depends on the property, really. You know, if you're just going to take something that they've already made money on once and they're going to double down and let's just change it to all females, I'm going to be skeptical, of course, because I most likely, all of us have seen the original, so it's like, well, what are they going to do that's different? And let's be honest, we're all nerds here. We all kind of read. There's plenty of new property out there that stars strong female characters that they could do, and they just don't do it. They'd rather just rehash something, swap genders, swap ethnicities, and then ride the cow, cash a check. Like, there's plenty of material out there that we have read that we probably want to see, which is why I'm excited about Ready Player One, because it's never been adapted. So we're going to see something that could have been adapted back in the 90s, but we're getting Steven Spielberg doing this, so that's something original. It's never been done. There's The Alienist, which is a popular book, which I heard they're going to make into a TV series, but I'm not 100%. There's so much out there.
Wrinkle in Time too. I was like,
yeah, Wrinkle in Time is another one. So there's plenty of property out there that has strong female characters. That's what I want to see. If you've never tapped in, let's open it up and explore it and put this on screen. There's a demand for it. There's a want for it. Rehashing, that's when I'm going to kind of slink back a little bit and be like, I'm going to be skeptical. But if you've got there's plenty of property, new property, strong female character, I'd rather see that.
But
Jim.
but
hey, Jim came out. You know what happened.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
let me correct on one thing though, y'all. If y'all don't stop these live action anime adaptations right now, Ghost in the Shell, Death Note, Avatar, the list goes on and on. You all know it. They're garbage, they're lazy, and they should never happen. There's not been I know some of y'all are gasping, there has not been a single one of these live action anime adaptations that have been worth a damn.
You got a question there.
Actually, that did look good. I didn't watch the whole thing. I only saw the trailer. Did it come out on Blu-ray in America yet?
I already got DVD.
Okay, cool.
Overseas. You know what? The first one, I was like, give me the second one, give me the third one. They are good.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite animes actually. Rurouni Kenshin. It's the Samurai X.
The first one was good, the other two were bad.
Oh really? I'll check it out. But it still gives me hope, but that was still done in Japan. I think 100% of the time when it's garbage is when they take one from Japan and they try to do it in America. 100% they're garbage. So
it could be done. A lot of things could be. They could actually make a really good video game adaptation into a movie, but I'm still waiting. The only one that's actually made, there's actually two. The one live action the first Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider, yeah, what's that one?
That's one. And then the other video game movie that made a lot of money was Angry Birds.
Yeah, that didn't help.
It made a lot of money. There's no denying that. But I want to see, where's my live action Halo? Right? Where's Metroid?
There's also Uncharted in development for a long time.
Uncharted. The Last of Us. They've been teasing us about that. I haven't seen casting, no director, no script, nothing.
They already got the casting. Ellen Page. I mean, she should be.
Well, she's sued.
She's sued. They took her likeness. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of property, and every time they've adapted, it's turned into dumpster fire. But yeah, I'm still hopeful. As long as Dr. Uwe Boll does not get his hands on it, I'm fine.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like when they're doing reboots and stuff like that today, is that they're almost robbing a generation of good content, right? Because when we were growing up, I don't know how old everybody is in this room, but I'm not that young anymore. So, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ghostbusters, there's like a litany of like great movies that are all originals, and you're just not seeing a litany of like good original movies anymore. Like they're non-existent, and it feels like. I mean, it's kind of cool to see my childhood come back up, but then again, it's not. You know what I mean? It's like I was a kid back then, I had rose-colored glasses on, then I go back and watch the original, and I was like, maybe it wasn't that good. So I just leave my childhood in the past and let these new kids like have their own new shows and new movies,
All right, we had a question over here.
It's not so much a question as a comment going back to Uncharted that it's almost, I really liked playing it, but Dishonored, which is kind of a smaller one, is coming out with also a side character story with the one-eyed, one-armed black woman gonna go out to kill God, and I'm very excited.
Yeah. Take my money.
Yeah. Well, that was another good switch to the protagonist too, because the first one was a guy, and the second one it was a woman, right? The protagonist.
You could do
either
the
or.
same thing where you could still be the guy character, or you could be his daughter. So like to please, the men who play the game, they're like, no, don't worry, there's still a male character you can play. I think it's in Assassin's Creed too, where it's
That's
like,
so weird. Yeah.
Assassin's Creed Liberation, I believe, where you're the Creole woman.
I'm going to tell you this right now. I almost always, when they give me that choice, play as a female character. It's just fun.
But you make ridiculous female characters, though.
I do.
mean, we gotta be honest. The characters they make are offensive.
My business out.
Like he was, no, I was just, so we were playing Saints Row the Third, you know, the game before. It's a hilarious series. And we're playing online, and literally, he was She-Hulk with pasties on. And I was like, dude, like, what are you doing, man?
That was fun, though.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, do we have another one right here?
Yeah, 2 comments. First off, Netflix Death Note was absolutely hilarious.
Hilarious bad or?
It has a slow motion scene where they play fucking Chicago.
Oh boy.
10, best I've ever seen of Netflix.
Okay.
Wow. All right.
Number 2.
Going back to the discussion of cultural appropriation. Yeah, I know. I know what you said about culture mixing, but usually what I hear with respect to when people criticize cultural appropriation, it's about like the depth of which, I guess, like a work interfaces with culture. Like, one of my favorite movies is Ghost Dog: Way of the Sand.
I love that movie. Yeah.
Yes, and it does have a lot of, it is made by a white dude, Jim Jarmusch. It does have all these influences from black culture, Asian culture. I mean, the soundtrack's done by the RZA.
Yeah.
It's engaging with the culture. It has people who are involved, but the stereotypical example of wearing a Native American war headdress at Coachella. It is, I guess, sort of an aesthetic element from this culture, but it's not really interfacing with the meaning, I guess.
Right, and that's the part that I think needs to be explained. Like, so if you're Native American, you see somebody with a Native American headdress on, explain to them how it's offensive to you. Like, you can't, to me, if somebody tells me that, if I say something that's offensive, and you tell me that it's offensive, and it's like, okay, that's good to know, I'm gonna go about my day. Because you didn't explain to me why it's offensive to you. And so, once you explain to me why something's offensive, then it's up to me to choose whether or not I'm gonna change my behavior. Like, if I think that I've deeply offended you, and that I can change this behavior easily, then, not easily, but if I can change my behavior to something better, then that's what I'll do. But I think that a lot of people are just being hit over the head with, you appropriate my culture, I find you offensive, but there's no real reason behind that. And if you don't educate somebody on it, then there's nothing gained, in my opinion. So, thank you. Got a question? You moved, yeah.
This is a serious question, kind of more funny actually. Would the new Doctor be considered transgender or a strong female lead?
Oh man. Oh, that's a good one.
Well,
I don't think that's the definition of transgender.
yeah, no, because he's being born as a... Yeah. No, because every single time I don't watch Doctor Who that much, but it's basically, it's a new body, right? So it's not trans at all, no.
But it's the same person. Like, I would assume that his personality, her personalities would stay the same throughout it, but it's like, how
His personality's changed.
Personalities change with each incarnation.
Whovians are,
Well, it's like, well, it'd be like if you believe in, sorry, go ahead.
It's visceral experiences that messed up. It's like, how would the character be really any different than the other Doctors we've had before?
I look at it from the Star Trek point of view. So in Star Trek, they have the race called the Trill. So every time the host kind of dies, they move the Trill to a new host. But that Trill, that being, is like this. It looks like a liver, but the being takes on its memories as its previous host and just accompanies to its new host. So I look at it kind of that way. It's just moving from one host to another, and then it's going to gain new experiences in its new host.
I look at it like if I died and I was resurrected, would I be Jesus? No, I'm kidding. Would I be transgender? No, I'd just be a new being, right? So, yeah.
What about Quantum Leap? Because there's an episode where he stepped into a female's body, but he was still himself. He just had to play out the role as a female.
Yeah.
We're gonna come back to you, Blue. He's on the podcast, just so you know. Do we have a question over here? Up front?
Yeah, I had a question. I haven't read them, but I know that there are some really cool graphic novels that use the comic book and graphic novel format to educate people about African American history. I know John Lewis has this 2 or 3 volume graphic novel about the history of the civil rights movement. I was wondering though, has anybody rebooted the Black History comics from the 60s and 70s? Because I went to a mostly black elementary school, so I ended up reading a bunch of those, and they were really, 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 really good. And I don't know if they've been republished or if anybody's updating them, but I think the educational potential for the comic and graphic novel format it has a lot more that it can do than all of this other stuff that I'm less enthusiastic about.
Yeah, so comic books back in the day, you're totally right. They did have a more educational element to them, and they actually had a lot of propaganda elements to them too. If you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, back in like World War II, Captain America was pretty much a propaganda piece. But yeah, we've seen today it's very hard to find a real educational comic book, and especially because of the big three comic books, Marvel, DC, Image, they're just not doing that right now. I think it's because they think they don't sell right now. However, like for my oldest daughter, she's 14 now, and I got her to actually learn how to read better through comic books. So that alone was like awesome for me. But I really wish they would have more educational comic books. That way I can not feel bad about just having them read about some fictional story. If they actually learn something from that story, that'd be awesome.
I wonder if anybody's taken the Black History comic books from the 50s, 60s, and 70s and put them on a website somewhere.
I'm not familiar with that. I will say there are some...
like Cal Exit and stuff, right?
Yeah. But there are some comics that or there's one in particular that I'm really excited about that is completely fictional but involves some great historical figures. In fact, my favorite historical figure of all time was Harriet Tubman. She is in a comic called Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer. She is killing slave owners in like a Django Unchained kind of awesome way. It seems like that. So obviously, it has the fictional element with the supernatural, but at least one historical figure in there.
Well, at least it's going to guarantee that more kids are going to know who Harriet Tubman was.
Absolutely.
Obviously, a modified history, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about the historical comics, but I hope they do come back. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to find more information about that. But you guys know who Kevin Smith is? Anybody ever heard of that guy? He kind of makes movies sometimes, but he's a big proponent of adding graphic novels to public school repertoire.
Absolutely.
Which he has a really good argument about it. If you ever watch Evening with Kevin Smith, he talks about it on there.
Lady with her hand raised in the back.
There have actually been a bunch of educational graphic novels coming out and independent. I have two really great ones on the Irish Revolution.
All right. What are they called?
Teaches computer science.
Wow.
Who?
Squirrel.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Someone who works in computers, so it teaches computer science. But I actually wanted to go back to diversity with Marvel. Marvel actually had a lot of really diverse characters from series that were canceled.
Oh, yes.
They never brought them back.
Yeah, I want to bring it up, but I didn't. But yeah, you're totally right. One of my favorite comic books from like 2 years ago was Nighthawk. And he was a black hero, and he went to Chicago and was like taking like Chicago problems to heart and like taking care of it. And he got canceled within like 6 issues. They also had a Latino character in Civil War II by the name of Ulysses that actually started the entire thing. They did nothing with the character, and there's a whole bunch of other characters as well. They don't put enough stock in them. And they don't really market them. They just expect people to really know who they are through like these other means, and nobody really knows who they are. Like most people don't know who Blackhawk is, or Nighthawk is, or Ulysses, or a whole bunch of other characters. And it's disturbing to me that they put way more money in these other characters than their diverse characters, where they say they care about diversity.
You should mention Power Lines at this point. There's a comic. It's not by it's Image. Yeah, it's Image comic, but it's a comic based in the Bay Area, and it's based in the Native American lore, and it has an African American teenager and a middle-aged white woman, and they develop powers.
She's a racist white lady.
She is racist, but I mean, it's right here in the Bay. It starts in Benicia and goes across the bridges. It's about a triangle of power, and nobody read it. It was canceled in like 3 issues. So.
But the reason why I say she's a racist white lady, because she literally was a racist white lady. I'm not just saying that just because she's white.
I mean that was the purpose of the racist white woman meeting an inner city young black teenage male. So.
Oh,
we have time for one more?
Yeah, I think we got time for one more. Let's do it.
So I'm interested in what you guys think about using video games as an educational medium for showing what daily life is like for non-white male characters.
Ooh, that's a good.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question because I've seen a lot of video game tools that are used to teach just almost anything. Like there's a game that I believe it's developed locally, but it's a game that shows basically what autism is like. So it's about how a child with autism interacts with other children on a playground, and you're able to play it and basically get this auditory sense of what it's like to be an autistic kid and how to help learn about what they learn so you can better help them. There's also, other games that'll teach you basically how to like survive and whatnot in the wilderness and things like that. I think it's actually great tools, especially now with VR. You could use this as a great learning tool to help children with spatial awareness, helping math and geometry problems. There's a huge potential slate to open up and teach on a new platform. Trip Hawkins, who's actually one of the founders of Electronic Arts, he was talking about a couple of years ago about, well, if you look at where children are doing, they're playing more video games. If they're playing more video games, then that's where education should go. We should change the way we educate our children. We're in the interactive age, so we should be interactive with our kids, show them a new way of learning. So I think that has just a skyrocket potential there.
Just add on to that real quick. So I think that's actually kind of a slippery slope for me. Because I understand what you're saying. I think that would be a cool medium to use. But then I'm also very concerned about how we would portray different ethnicities. Because if I see, a black character that every time he's in the hood, fuck that. You know what I mean? Because we're all different, and I think that people, they might get caught up in stereotypes instead of just realizing that we're all just Americans and everybody has their difficult moments in life, everybody has their problems. But yeah, if it's well done and they show like the rainbow of life that we have, then I think that'd be great. But if they just stick to stereotypes, I just don't want to see it.
All about the execution. I think we have time for just one more right over here.
Coming on to that, how do you think media should handle stories that are sent in lower class areas where there's a lot of poor minorities? Like how do you write it so that it stops falling into the whole stereotypical gangsta?
Education, better parenting, educating the parents. I think when you see a bad kid, 95% of the time, the parents weren't that great, to be honest. And that's what I've seen in my life. One of the reasons why I did decent in life and some of my friends didn't is because my parents were kind of strict, and that led me on the right path. And I think that there's a lot of, when you go to impoverished neighborhoods and you see kids doing bad things, what else do you notice? Nobody's showing them the right thing, right? Like you don't see, like in a suburban neighborhood, somebody doing bad things around, everybody knows who the bad kid is, right? But in certain neighborhoods, the kid just gets away with it. In other neighborhoods, they don't. They crack down on it. I think it comes down to parenting, education, and then obviously if you have a sense of community, where you're going to let people know that, hey, we're not going to let these types of things happen in our neighborhood anymore. And I think that's a good place to start.
All right, I think we have run out of time. You guys are beautiful and wonderful. Intelligent geeks. I love them all. We have cards up here. I want y'all to go on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, hit up Black and Black Times Infinity, @EthanBTI, listen to the podcast. We got it going on every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30, and the live chat is lit.
That it is. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Only a few decades ago, and through his God-given genius of science, man, at last, has succeeded in penetrating further and further into the unknown vastness of space. Yet many questions remain unanswered.